Hello. All right. So today's video, I am doing another reading, as you can tell by the title. Where we left off, let's see. They just had a fire at the inn where they were staying, and these strange men are looking out over the village. They are they're not good guys. They had set fire to the inn, and instead of leaving immediately, they decided to watch and see that no one survived. So today I'm going to start with a chapter that is one page. And yeah. All right, so I'm going to wait a little bit and see who else is joining. My jaw hurts. All right. Okay, everything looks good. No one has really popped in yet, but that is okay. All right, so I'm going to start right now. And just in case you were wondering, spoiler alert, because there is a lot happening in this reading. Someone might get hurt. Someone might be jealous, and more to come. All right. More letters. Guys, if you get turned in a different direction from what I've told you, circle around in a wide curve and then continue to follow the plan. You meet us in the second village past Nanairi's capital. There you will set fire to the building I specified. After that, don't stick around. Wait for us at the last village and then attack. You will be well rewarded for your service. The group of men started grinning at each other after reading the letter. They would be well rewarded? That sounded amazing. They wondered what kind of jewels or gold they would get. In another part of the land, an older man was rereading a letter of his own. He had gotten it the other day. Grandfather, as I promised you, everything is in motion. We are heading to Nanairi's capital tomorrow, and then we will head on either the next day or a few days later. If everything goes to plan, then the inn we will stay at will be set on fire, with a prince in it. And then the princess will be available for you to do whatever you were planning. As long as I get my part, I'm cool with it. Your grandson. She whimpered in pain, and the woman that had come outside gasped happily at how Dmitri was holding Katerina. How much longer? Katerina asked Eduardo. Not that I'm complaining, just wondering if we need to stop for food. Eduardo thought about it for a moment. It's about 2 more hours. We're halfway there. We should stop, though, to rest the horses. It's been a long 2 hours. They're exhausted. We have been working them pretty hard, Katerina said, rubbing her horse's neck sadly. Dmitri pulled his horse to a stop slowly. No need to go flying because he wanted to stop and rest. The others followed his lead. Don, can you please get our snacks out? I'll get some water for the horses. I'll walk yours and mine, Katerina piped up, just to cool them off a bit. I'll get mine and Don's, Louise smiled, taking Don's horse and leading it in circles to cool the horses down slightly. They couldn't unburden the horses at the moment because they had to ride on shortly, but at least all of the horses wouldn't have the extra weight of humans on their backs for a small bit of time. After they had snacks and drank some water, and letting the horses rest, the travelers mounted up and started off again towards Sarai. They had 2 hours to go before they got there, but at least the way was smooth. Reaching Sarai, Katerina let out a sigh of relief. They were finally going to get some answers. She dismounted and walked forward to see what the village offered in terms of people and food. A woman approached her and asked, "What brings you to Sarai?" Katerina looked at her. "We are here to ask if anyone here has heard or seen of a silver-haired man that sent threatening letters to Amor." The woman thought about it, but couldn't think of anything. "I haven't heard anything. Surely someone has heard something about this man. Come on, let's go to the village center. Maybe we will find someone there, that knows something." She eagerly waved them to follow her. Katerina and the others looked at each other before Katerina began following the older woman. The guys dismounted and followed as well. Katerina looked around as she followed the woman to the center of the village. People were starting to look at them as they walked closer. Dmitri walked up beside Katerina and looked over at her. It seemed that they were getting closer to finding out who was threatening Katerina's family. His hand brushed hers, and when she looked up at him, he smiled. She smiled back. The woman that led them over to the village center turned to look at them. "Could you please tell us what you know of the person threatening you? Maybe we could help you a little more." Katerina told them all that she knew. She told them that the mysterious man was gray-haired and that he had been visiting several villages in the 2 countries so far. She asked, "Do any of you know where he might have gone from here? Did he cross into Prince Dimitri's country? Did he head back deeper into Prince Eduardo's country?" The people of Sarai talked amongst themselves for a while before a little boy stepped forward. "Your Highness," he said to Katerina, "I saw him ride towards Prince Dimitri's country. He looked really happy about something. I don't know what, though." "Thank you," Katerina responded. "You've been a big help. Your parents must be proud that you're so observant." The boy's mom laughed as she walked forward to put her hands on his shoulders. "He's too observant sometimes." She smiled down at her son. He smiled back at her. Dmitri laughed. He's going to be a great leader one day. Then he noticed a man coming out of the crowd. The man was carrying an unsheathed sword. "Run!" he yelled, making sure that the boy and his mom were one of the first gone. Katerina was pushed back towards safety, but more men came after the travelers with swords drawn. She watched as her 4 companions were surrounded, and she turned to see how many villagers got away. A man came rushing at her, sword raised. So she grabbed her sword from the saddlebag on her mare. Pulling it from the sheath, her sword met his in an instant. A loud clash of metal on metal surprised her assailant. Smirking, Katerina used the skills that her brothers taught her to fight the man hell-bent on maiming or killing her. As they fought, the world around them faded into nothing. Her moves were fluid and her strikes were precise. Katerina dodged a blow and swung her sword up to knock his arm aside. Eduardo killed the men he was fighting and turned to check on Katerina. His jaw dropped for a second before he clenched it tightly. Dmitri didn't want to kill his assailants, but they were trying to kill the group. As he followed first one, then another, and finally the last man went down. Dmitri shook his head sadly. The loss of any life was a sad occasion. He turned to see if Katerina was okay and stared. Don and Luis fought back to back to bring one assailant each down. Then they went over to the 2 princes. "Your Highness," Don said, "is everything okay?" He followed Dmitri's gaze to where Katerina was just now finishing her fight with her opponent. Wow. Katerina turned to her companions and started towards them. A sharp pain pierced her side as the assailant she had fought lunged up to stab her in the side, and she cried out, falling forward. Her companions rushed forward, and Eduardo killed the assailant swiftly. Dmitri held her in one arm while pressing on the wound to stop or slow the bleeding. Katerina winced. "Sorry," Dmitri said. He tried being gentle, but he had to stop the bleeding. Luis handed Dmitri some bandages and watched as Dmitri wrapped Katerina's waist. They then had to decide if they were going to move on or if they were going to get Katerina healed quickly. Katerina made their choice for them, so they headed off towards Dmitri's country and the castle in the middle of it. The trip to Dmitri's castle took a bit longer than they had originally thought. Katerina's wound, but they slowly made their way through the country, only stopping to get food or a bit of medicine for Katerina. When they finally made it to the village surrounding Dmitri's castle, Katerina was a little flushed. She looked around at Dmitri's family castle as they rode up to it. Her side was still bandaged, and she was still sore, but she felt that she had to keep going until she met Dmitri's family. When they stopped the horses, she waited until Dmitri walked over before she tried dismounting. She started to fall when her feet hit the ground, but Dmitri grabbed her before she could. She whimpered in pain, and the woman that had come outside gasped happily at how Dmitri was holding Katerina. "Dmitri," the woman called, getting their attention. She smiled when her eyes met Dmitri's. "Mother," he grinned. "Allow me to introduce all of you to my mother, Queen Zoya Romanova." "Mother, these are my companions, Princess Katerina, Prince Eduardo, and Luis." Queen Zoya looked at each person as they were named, giving a small nod to each. Her eyes went back to where the princess was, and she gasped in horror. "My dear, you're bleeding." "I'm bleeding through the bandages?" Katerina asked, and looked down at her side. "Oh." She started to fall again. but Dmitri swept her into his arms and carried her inside. A healer was called to help Katerina, and he assured everyone that it wasn't life-threatening. It will be fine, but she will be on bed rest for 2 days so that she can heal. The wound wasn't bandaged properly, and it slid down enough for the wound to bleed through. Thank you, said Dmitri gratefully. It was no trouble at all, my prince. Queen Zoya and her husband looked at each other, pleased over their son's caring of the young woman. They couldn't help but smile. The healer washed his hands again and looked up at the people around the princess's bed. Okay, she needs to rest, so please come back tomorrow. He tried to be strict but respectful. Unsurprisingly, everyone was discouraged to have to leave. Queen Zoya and her husband made their way back to their bedroom. That son of ours, huh? What do you mean? Nikolai asked. He tilted his head. He's already in love with her. You can tell by the way he carried her, Zoya answered. And he really didn't want to leave her alone. She smiled at her husband. Oh. His eyebrows rose high on his forehead. 4 girls made their way through the castle. 2 of them wore breeches, and the other 2 wore long dresses. They were searching for their brother. As they walked through the castle, they looked everywhere. Seems like you really like her, Maria said with a smile. Two more chapters. Okay, I can do this. Finally, they found him in the library. They had walked through several long hallways and down 2 flights of stairs. Hey, brother, Maria said, running over to her brother and hugging him. She was so glad to see him again after so long. She laughed when the other 3 hugged the 2 of them together. Hold on, I'm not going anywhere right now. Dmitri laughed. He hugged all of his sisters, and they all sat down in soft cushioned chairs. So, how were you all while I was gone? Maria replied, Well, of course I was good. I read a lot and finished a few paintings. I'd love to see them, Dmitri smiled. Catherine smiled. I practice shooting arrows. I'm getting much better. I get closer to the center of the bullseye every day. Good job, Dmitri praised Catherine. Natalia laughed. I've been working with the guards on falls and defense. Dmitri smiled. How are you doing with it? I think I'm doing well. It's a bit redundant. Natalia smiled when she responded. And you, Tatiana? The youngest sister smiled slightly. I am still practicing the violin, and my piano skills have improved. Dmitri smiled. Great work, Tatiana. They continued talking for a while, getting caught up, and Natalia asked, So, what is your princess like? Is she nice? Is she a tomboy? Is she a girlish person? Dmitri laughed. She's great. She was a little rough when we first met because I didn't recognize her. And because she didn't want an arranged marriage. She didn't like either of us princes and was a little stuck up. He laughed again. She is fierce and loyal. She's really adventurous. On our journey, she was able to fight like one of us. Seems like you really like her, Maria said with a smile. I really do. He rubbed the back of his neck. Those 2 days were the longest 2 days for the princes. They had a few practice fights, and they even did some target practice. Of course, there were a couple fights where each prince was mad about the other prince still wanting the princess's attention. Then a maid came out to tell them that Katerina was awake and taking a shower. She was finally healed enough to do so. The princes hurried inside, but they went to their own rooms to shower off the sweat from the day's activities. Katerina found a note on her pillow after her shower. It had been 2 days since they had arrived at Dimitri's castle, and her side was healed enough for her to take a shower and move around. She walked towards her bed and picked up the note. I will kill your father for what he did. You might have escaped getting killed earlier, and your death might have made your father suffer horribly, but you'll just have to watch what I do to him instead. His death, and possibly the death of the rest of your family, is going to be wonderful. She read, her eyes widening with each word, and she screamed her fear and frustration out. Dimitri ran into her room at the scream and gathered her into his arms. What's wrong? He threatened to kill my entire family. I think he's going to do so within the month. She shuddered in fear. I have to go home. He tightened his grip on her. I agree. I think we should all go back to help your family. She looks up at him right as he looks down at her. They are only inches away from each other, and she can feel his breath on her face. She looks at his lips and then back to his eyes. Thinking over her past dreams about her inner self knowing who she wanted to be with, she closed her eyes. Dimitri was fascinated about the way she looked at him, and she was so beautiful. His breath hitched when she closed her eyes, and he started to move the few inches closer. Before his lips could meet hers, the door opened with a slam. What was that scream of? Eduardo asked as he burst into the room, but stopped in shock at the positioning of his two companions. Katerina's eyes flew open, and she and Dimitri both turned to look at Eduardo. Then Katerina pulled away from Dimitri. Sorry about that. Blushing in embarrassment, and flees the room. The two princes stare at each other for a moment, trying to understand the feelings between them. Before Eduardo scoffed, he shook his head before also walking out of the room. Dimitri sighed. He couldn't believe that he almost kissed her. He was so close. Then he sighed again over the fact that Eduardo seemed angry over Dimitri's closeness with Katerina. Maybe he was jealous? Dimitri walked out of the room, heading towards the dining hall, where the others surely were. Katerina was talking with King Nikolai and Queen Zoya. She really liked them. They were super nice and seemed to like her as well. When Eduardo arrived, she nodded to him and went back to talking with Dimitri's parents. Well, I'm glad you like our kingdom, said Nikolai. Zoya added, come back whenever you can, even if you don't choose. She saw movement in the doorway. Dimitri, there you are. Your companions are already seated. She frowned slightly. Sorry, Mother. Katerina looked away when Dimitri walked into the dining hall, and when he sat down when he sat across from her. She almost fainted from embarrassment. She looked up at the Queen and King. She looked up at the Queen and King Nikolai. Your Majesties, I have something to say. I received a letter today threatening the lives of my family. I need to go back to help them. Dimitri's parents looked at each other before they looked at her and both nodded. We understand, Queen Zoya replied. Thank you, Katerina said before Dimitri spoke up. I'm going with her. She'll need backup. Dimitri turned to his attendant. I would like you to stay to help out here, in case this bad guy decides to come hurt my family as well. Don nodded seriously. Son, are you sure? Zoya asked. She looked at her son, worried about the trip and the coming battle. He was her only son, the only one to inherit the crown if Nikolai died. Darling, said Nikolai, let him do this. He's doing this for the girl he loves. Both Dimitri and Katerina blushed, thinking about the almost kiss earlier. Eduardo glared at Dimitri, but turned to the king and queen. I'll go too. This way she has even more protection. He looked at Louise. Go tell my parents what is going on and protect them, please. Yes, Your Highness, Louise replied. Very well, said Nikolai. He looked at all three teens that were leaving to go back to Katerina's country. Be safe and take care of each other. We will, Katerina replied, tearing up a little at the goodbye. She was sad to leave such wonderful people, but she needed to go home quickly to warn them about the mysterious bad guy that threatened them. The next morning, everyone gathered as Katerina, Dimitri, and Eduardo headed out on the long journey back. They rode away from the castle and down to the village. The villagers waved them off as they went, cheering for them. Be safe. Come back soon, Prince Dimitri. I hope you come back for a visit soon, Princess Katerina. Good luck. The three royals waved back, showing that they heard the villagers. On and on it went until they left the village behind. Turning west, they sped up their horses. They were taking the straightest route to Katerina's country. Well, here we go, Katerina said. Dimitri, will you lead? Sure. He nudged his stallion faster. They rode in a straight line, which would have confused any trackers on how many there were in the group, if there were any trackers to begin with. The scenery passed swiftly by, mostly green with some brown as tree trunks. And there was a river at some point, but it disappeared too fast for Katerina to keep her eyes on it. Katerina worried about her family back home. She wondered what was going on at that moment. Maybe they had another letter arrive. Maybe they were already under attack. They had to make it back to Katerina's country as quickly as possible. No stopping at villages, no distractions. Just a straight shot to her country and camping briefly along the way. Instead of the 3.5 months it took to reach Dimitri's castle, with all of the stops along the way, it only took 2 weeks in a straight shot. Just like how Dimitri came to her country to meet her. In fact, Dimitri was the one to lead them on this part of the entire journey. That first night, Katerina had a dream about the first time she met Dimitri. Looking back on it, she realized that she was really judgmental over the fact that he was a prince, and that he didn't recognize her. She was ashamed over how she had treated him. The way he had blushed when he complimented her appearance was adorable, and she just wanted to make it up to him somehow. I was really tempted to leave it at this part, so count yourselves lucky that I didn't do it. Letters again. A man furiously wrote one last letter, his gray hair falling out of the low ponytail and into his face. This was the last letter he would write, because he was going to end this once and for all. Julius, by the time you get this, I will have left to come to you. You have not done what I asked, so in 1 week I will come for your head. Your precious daughter got lucky on her journey. Her death would have made your torture so much sweeter. You know who I am. A letter from Dmitri to his parents. Mother and Father, when you read this, we will reach Katerina's castle by tomorrow. I don't know what will happen, but I hope everything will go well. Take care, and I hope that I can send you a letter after this is all over to let you know what has happened. Please tell the girls that I love them and that I want them to continue to do well in their lessons. I love all of you very much, and I hope I get to see you again soon. Be safe. With all my heart, Dmitri. The 2-week journey back begins. Day 1. The first day, Katerina was completely lost in thought over what her family might be going through right then. She blindly followed Dmitri, not seeing the worried looks that Dmitri sent back at her. Nor did she see the curious look on Eduardo's face. Their horses were trotting over the border into Eduardo's country when she snapped out of her daze. She looked around. Oh, we made it so far already? Yes, Eduardo, replied Eduardo. In a few hours, we will reach the village where you got hurt. He frowned. Oh, Katerina looked ahead. We could bypass it if you prefer, Dmitri suggested. She shook her head. No, it's a straighter shot if we go through the village. She nudged her mare to trot alongside Dmitri's stallion. Let's hurry. They upped their speed and finally came across the village. A woman stepped out of her house and saw them. Princess, you're back. Do you feel better? How is your injury? Katerina laughed. I'm fine. The wound is much better. Thanks for your concern. She looked back at the house. How's your son? He's doing well. Still gets into trouble like most little boys do. The woman seemed pleased that the princess remembered her son from the other day. It was a hectic day, including an injury. Why don't you spend the night here and move on in the morning? That would be great. Thanks, Dmitri replied. He smiled at the woman. Noticing his companion's expressions, he explained, We won't often find beds along the way, so we'd better take the offer now. Oh, Katerina nodded. That makes sense. Thank you, ma'am. The woman smiled. Just call me Evelyn. She then led them to her 2 spare rooms. Princess, this will be your room tonight, and the 2 princes will have to share. I'm sorry that I only have 2 spare rooms. I hope you sleep well. She curtsied and left. Well, good night, Katerina said, curtsying. Then she walked over to the room given to her for the night. There was a full-sized bed with an end table on each side. A lamp sat on one, and a small clock sat on the other. Good night, said the two princes. The 2 princes replied together. They looked at each other and went into their room for the night. Their room had 2 full-sized beds with 2 end tables between them. There were lamps on each end table so that each light could be controlled by the person on the nearest bed. Day 2. The next morning, Katerina got dressed for the journey and brushed her long hair. When she was done gathering all her things, she stepped out of her room, shut the door, and walked down the hall to the kitchen, where Evelyn was cooking breakfast. "Oh, that smells wonderful." "Thank you," Evelyn laughed happily. She enjoyed cooking for others. In the skillet in front of her, bacon and ham sizzled, letting off a mouth-watering scent. Off to the side was a pan of scrambled eggs that she occasionally stirred to keep from burning. "Please, wash up." She turned to her son who was watching her cook. "You too, Seth, and go get Prince Eduardo and Prince Dmitri on your way back." "Yes, Mama." The young boy hopped off the stool and ran down the hall. Katerina washed her hands in the sink and smiled at Evelyn. "He's so energetic." "He got that from his father," Evelyn replied, smiling fondly in memory. "He died when Seth was 3, back when we had a fever sweep through the village. It took about a quarter of our people, mostly elders, but a few young people too." "I'm sorry for your loss." Katerina frowned sadly as she got plates and forks ready for the group. "Thank you, Princess." Evelyn went back to cooking the last of the food. "Katerina." The princess went to set the table. "What?" "My name is Katerina, and I would like it if you were to use it." She smiled at the look of shock. The 3 guys came into the kitchen as the last of the food was put on the table. They saw the 2 ladies smiling and having fun. As they all ate, they spoke about what was going on and why they were headed back to Katerina's castle so quickly. Dmitri said, "I have a feeling that something bad will happen, but I don't know what it could be." "Me too," Katerina replied. "Well, we must be off. Thank you for the meal, Evelyn. Would you like us to help you clean up before we head out?" "No, thank you, Katerina. My boys will help. You 3 get on the road before the sun gets too high. It'll be a hot one today." The princess looked a little shocked that Evelyn spoke so casually to the princess, but calmed down a bit when they noticed that Katerina wasn't surprised by the occurrence. They all got ready to go, saying goodbye to their hosts, and headed off on the way to Katerina's castle. Eduardo rode next to Katerina and tried to start a conversation. "What do you think we will find when we get to your castle?" "I don't know, and that worries me." Katerina shook her head. "We could be walking into a trap. We could get there, and the battle has already happened. Maybe they are all dead. Maybe they are all fine. I don't know. We just have to take it one day at a time." "Good plan," Dmitri replied from her other side. "No use worrying so much over something you can't control. We will see when we get there and decide what to do then." He looked over at her. Katerina smiled at Dmitri. He was so calm and gentle. After that almost kiss, she felt more aware of him. She shook her head. No use thinking about that now. Besides, she still wanted to marry on her own terms. Why did everyone else have to make her decisions for her? They rode for hours, stopping at times to water their horses and get some rest to themselves. Dmitri offered everyone some water and food and said, "When I made the first journey, I stopped at the town where the inn was burned down. Do we do the same now, or should we move on? I only ask because we probably won't have a bed for the night, and it might trigger nightmares." Katerina thought about it. "I don't mind if we go there. It would be good to see if they have set up a temporary inn until the new one can be built." She wondered if anyone had died in the fire. Eduardo saw the look on her face. "They won't blame you for the fire, Princess. They'll probably be glad we made it through that night." Sorry, my tongue is tied. Eduardo is right. No one will be mad about that. Dmitri laid a hand on her shoulder. "I'm not worried about that," she replied. I'm worried that people probably died in that fire." The mood turned sour as they ate and rested. Then Dmitri stood up and went to his horse. "Come on, let's go." They mounted and rode towards the village. Dmitri thought about what Katerina had said. Well, at least one little boy was alive from that fire. After a few more hours of riding, they came upon the open gates of the village. "This is new," Dmitri remarked, looking at the tall gates. A man standing next to the gate spoke up. "We built it after the fire. We didn't want anyone else to cause trouble here." "I assure you, sir, that I completely understand." Katerina smiled at the man. She noticed that the gates connected to the walls that went all the way around the village. "Do you have anything like a temporary inn where we may stay the night?" The man recognized the trio. "You were here that night. We wondered if you were all okay, Princess. As a matter of fact, we have one guest house turned into a temporary inn, just until a new one gets built. It should take us a few months. I'll show you the way." He turned to call someone over to take his place guarding the gates. When they came over, he turned back to the travelers. "Come on. I can even lead you to the place where you can put your horses." Dmitri, Eduardo, and Katerina all dismounted their horses and followed behind the older man. "Thank you for this," Dmitri said, looking at the man and wondering his name. "The name is Lawson. Jacob Lawson. You can call me Jacob or Jake." Jacob laughed as he led them to the stables, which had survived because the fire at the inn had been put out quickly. "You can put your horses here. It's only a few yards from here where the temporary inn is." The family that owns the land next to here turned their guest house into a temporary inn by expanding the rooms and adding a second floor. "You'll have good rooms there, and the beds are nice." And that is where we end. I am so happy that we are getting through the story. I hope you enjoyed it so far. And it's a little bit of a cliffhanger. The next chapter, they continue on their journey. And let's see. There's a little bit of uneasiness. There's the final destination where they meet up with her family. And then the reading after that is the beginning of the end. So Yeah. And I have already noticed throughout these readings where I need to rewrite. Oh my goodness. I need to do so many revision work, so much revision work for this series already, and I'm on the 3rd book. Speaking of, my friend should probably be streaming in a bit, and if she is, yay, I will pardon me, I will probably write while she's streaming. Yep, it looks like she is going to be live. In about 15 minutes. So I hope you enjoyed this, and the next reading will be in 2 days, Wednesday, and I shall see you then. All right, so this was quick, a lot quicker than last time. Last time brought me right up to the 2 o'clock mark, and yeah, so I'm leaving off 15 minutes early this time. All right, so I had fun. I really did. I have my tea in this mug that says, "This mug contains magic." So, it's really good tea. All right, I am going to continue to enjoy my tea, write a little bit, and watch my friend. So, all right. If you were interested in watching her videos, today she is reading one of her books, book 5 of her Beautiful Demons series, or as it is now known, the Shadow Demon Saga. And her channel is Sarah Cannon. All right. I'll put it here. I don't have a link to it right now, but if I could type, I would type. All right. So there you go. It just says go check out Sarah Cannon's YouTube channel to listen to her reading her own book, Rival Demons, which is book 5 of the Shadow Demon Saga. All right. And with that, I will leave you. Goodbye. Love you. Have fun. And I shall see you Wednesday.